Devil Daggers isn't a new game. Nothing about it is new. Nothing about Devil Daggers feels like it's revolutionary or in any way breaking the mold on how we play or create games. But that doesn't mean that I don't adore Devil Daggers. If anything, Devil Daggers is a game that is timeless. It's immune to trends and untouched by whatever's out there now. It can be enjoyed essentially forever. I've put about 17 or so hours into Devil Daggers, and that's somewhat odd considering how many games out there that are fresh and new and promise to deliver on things you've never seen before, that boast cutting-edge graphics, are full of thousands of lines of dialogue with characters and a plot and setting we've never imagined before, and yet they grow stale and boring, and I can barely play them a few sittings before moving back to my favorites. The Anthems and the Call of Duties and the Assassin's Creeds, they come and they go, but Devil Daggers just feels immortal. And I think that's why I love this game so much. It appeals to me on this base level. It pushes me, it encourages me, it always is there for me to improve upon. Devil Daggers is a game that I can play in whatever small bursts I wish, and it will always be the same, and it's always there waiting for me. I'm pushed to do better, all the time, to learn the little things as I go, to improve, to bring my name higher and higher in the scoreboard. You watch your record time budge upwards, sometimes only seconds at a time, but you watch it grow nonetheless. You hit the milestones you set for yourself, and maybe it's a minute, then 2, then 200 seconds, as long as you think you can go. And you always find that once you stick with it, how far you can go is always somehow further than how long you thought you could. The mechanics, though, of Devil Daggers, it's simple. Bare bones, one might even say. You move, you shoot, there's very little to the game apart from those core fundamentals. The simplicity of it is what gives the game its compelling allure. And the objective, it's just to survive as long as you can. Graphically, it's a very retro-inspired aesthetic. Everything is simply animated with mostly browns and reds, dull shades over a dark black background atop a Quake-like flat stone floor. In that sense, it's pleasing to the eye. It's by design this way, and it reminds me that the attempt at higher graphical fidelity or realism can often instead just reveal weaknesses in competence or ability by the designers. Limitations aren't seen as objective flaws in design here. They're seen as quirks of the aesthetic the artist is trying to achieve. And that aesthetic here is, obviously, hell-like, demonic, you could say. Enemies are skulls, or horny skulls, or tall, tentacled, Lovecraftian monoliths, or bug-like monstrosities, and towering constructs that seem more like buildings than living entities. And there's only one arena that you'll be inside for the entire game, so calling it a map seems a little excessive. There is no cover, there are no walls, no barriers. There is simply a flat surface and a circular shape over an endless black void. When you look at the scoreboard and see how long people have survived, you never have to ask yourself, how were they good, or in what way were they good, or what part of Devil Daggers were they good at? It's the entirety of Devil Daggers that you experience as well. It's all the same. In this arena, enemies will spawn at designated times, but at random locations. You kill enemies as you see fit, so you don't get overwhelmed. And certain enemies, when they're killed or when their weak spots are destroyed, will drop red gems that the player collects to power up their attack. It's imperative to collect these gems so that you can have a chance at destroying enemies, as eventually they will come in larger and larger numbers and boast higher and higher health amounts. Basic attacks come in two forms. Holding down the mouse button will launch a never-ending stream of daggers with a slight random spray towards the target, but tapping the mouse button will fire a group of daggers like a scattergun, and using these attacks appropriately is a key to clearing out targets as best you can, and that's ultimately a major component of the gameplay. Since enemies will spawn around you at designated times, you can clear the arena, potentially, of all foes before new ones even spawn in, waiting for the next wave of spawns to occur. But that also means that your run can become very difficult if you get bad luck, and enemies elude destruction and you are having a difficult time catching up with the spawns. And that's kind of a blessing and a curse of Devil Daggers as a game. It has a mix of randomness along with the standardization, and it can indeed affect your progress. Enemies, for instance, can sometimes spawn behind other enemies and provide protection to them, or they can group together wonderfully for very quick kills. They can spawn at the other end of the map, which makes it harder for you to reach them and kill them. It's this intrinsic aspect of randomization that keeps every run just a little different, but ultimately operating by a set of rules that the player will recognize and become familiar with as time goes on, especially since there's an option to toggle the current time of your run at the top of your screen, so you know about where you are at all times, and you can sort of gauge what's going to happen next. But when it comes to randomization, standardization, consistency, look at games like Risk of Rain 2, where power-ups and goodies are scattered at random around the map every time you start playing. Another example is Vermintide 2. The appearance of special enemies and hordes and bosses will vary with every run of the same level, depending on your progress, which gives every individual venture its own feel and potential higher difficulty, even if the price is that it sacrifices objective levels of repetition and memorization capability. The enemies that are found in Devil Daggers aren't particularly varied, but without a doubt they have different threat potentials that demand differing acknowledgement by the player. Spiders will absorb precious red gems and eat them. Plus, eventually they'll begin spawning their own new kind of enemy as well, so they're almost always a priority target to be slain. The typical enemy spawners can be left alone if you wish in order to essentially farm red gems at early stages of the game from the enemies that they spawn, and then wiped out later if you can. Some enemies, like the flying centipedes, aren't particularly deadly in and of themselves, but they do block lines of sight and other shots, and they house a potentially vast reward of red gems as they are damaged. Another of the few mechanics of Devil Daggers concerns the lack of attacking. When the player is not throwing out daggers, red gems are attracted your way and can be absorbed by you, giving you an incentive to not simply be shooting at literally all times. Using windows where survival isn't an immediate priority to take a moment and gather up all the gems of the previously slain enemies, it's part of the strategy to be found in such simple mechanics. Later on, for instance, when you power up yourself enough, you will store gems in your hand and then launch blue homing daggers out with the right-click button, meaning that gems can be saved as an attack for when you feel it's particularly needed. Replays are available whenever a run comes to an end, and the view can be shifted from a standard first-person perspective to a top-down view of the entire arena, meaning that you can see just how you fared with a new sense of awareness that you might not have had while in the thick of combat. But all in all, Devil Daggers is a very simple game that still is able to capture my competitive spirit while not being punishing nor frustrating. I'm a pretty competitive doggo. I like to win. I chastise myself and my team when poor performance cost us. I have my moments when maybe I'm a bit too super serial. But Devil Daggers doesn't make me upset. I don't groan in frustration or become irate. Games are quick to play, and they're instant to restart. And the game seemingly is encouraging me constantly to increase my score. And memes aside, reaching new milestones for time fills me with a sense of pride and accomplishment. I don't feel as if I'm competing against random people on the global leaderboards necessarily that I can't ever measure up to. I feel as if I'm constantly competing with myself, as if the test here is my willingness to learn and improve. Devil Daggers is a perfect example of a game that I know I'll be playing for ages to come. It always has a spot on my hard drive, and it will always have that same spot. My max score, as of the time of this review, I know it might seem paltry to those who are far more talented than me, but it's a mean 300.854. But I know that it's only a matter of time until that 300.854 becomes 310, 320, 350, and who knows, maybe one day even 400. And it might seem like a very trivial thing, but I can't help but feel like, even if it is a ultimately meaningless and trivial accomplishment, it was an accomplishment that I earned, and that has a lot of meaning to me.